France just made the most dangerous miscalculation of the century. They thought Niger was weak. They thought the mines were still theirs. They thought Pyongyang was bluffing. They were wrong on all three. North Korea just responded, and what they sent to the Sahel was not a diplomat. 1,000 tons of uranium, 2 mines, 3 military governments aligned against Paris, and a nuclear-armed state that has nothing left to lose. The Western media is silent. The maps are already being redrawn. What France started in the desert, North Korea just turned into something the entire world should fear. This is only the beginning. 1,000 tons of uranium. That is a number at the center of one of the most consequential geopolitical confrontations Africa has seen in decades. Not a war fought with armies crossing borders, at least not yet, but a battle over who owns the ground beneath a desert nation's soil, who has the right to decide where its resources go, and whether 50 years of a particular kind of relationship between Africa and Europe can simply be declared over with a decree and a deployment of troops. Niger just declared it over. In the months following the July 2023 military coup that brought General Abdurrahman Tiani to power in Niamey, the junta moved with a speed and deliberateness that surprised even seasoned analysts of Sahelian politics. French forces were expelled. Diplomatic relations with Paris were frozen. And then came the move that sent shockwaves through European energy ministries, nuclear strategy circles, and geopolitical think tanks from Washington to Beijing. Niger's new military government announced it was redirecting approximately 1,000 tons of uranium. Uranium that had for decades flowed almost exclusively into French nuclear reactors to North Korea. Let that settle for a moment. The mineral that has powered a substantial portion of France's nuclear electricity, the resource that sits at the heart of one of the world's most developed civilian nuclear programs, was being sent eastward, not to a rival Western nation, not to a rising emerging economy, but to one of the most sanctioned, isolated, and geopolitically combustible states on the planet. This is not simply an African mining dispute. This is a stress test for the entire post-colonial resource architecture that has governed the relationship between France and its former African territories since independence. And the outcome of this confrontation will define how the Sahel, and perhaps much of Francophone Africa, relates to its former colonizer for the next generation. To understand how we arrived here, you need to understand what uranium has meant to France and what French uranium extraction has meant to Niger. For more than 5 decades, Niger has been one of the world's most significant producers of uranium. The Arlit and Imararan deposits in the country's northwest sit atop some of the largest known uranium reserves on the African continent. The French nuclear company Orano, formerly known as Areva, has operated these mines under arrangements that stretch back to the late 1960s, agreements signed at a time when Niger had only recently emerged from French colonial administration and when the terms of natural resource contracts between newly independent African states and their former European colonizers were, to put it diplomatically, rarely negotiated on equal footing. France built an energy strategy around nuclear power with an ambition that no other nation on Earth matched. Today, nuclear energy accounts for roughly 70% of France's electricity generation. That is an extraordinary dependence on a single fuel source, and that fuel, uranium, does not exist in commercially viable quantities on French soil. France needs to import it. For decades, Niger was among the most reliable and significant sources of that import. The relationship, from France's perspective, was mutually beneficial. Investment in mining infrastructure, employment for Nigerian workers, and royalty revenues for the state. From Niger's perspective, the arrangement looked different. The country remained one of the poorest nations on Earth despite sitting on mineral wealth that powered one of Europe's most advanced economies. The contracts were opaque. The returns to the Nigerian public were widely seen as disproportionate to the value extracted. And French military presence, framed as counterterrorism support against Sahel jihadist groups, came with its own political costs that accumulated over years into a deep popular resentment. Is this a strategic move born of genuine sovereignty, or the opening gambit in a broader geopolitical realignment? The answer, as you will see, is almost certainly both. When Kiani soldiers moved against President Mohamed Bazoum in July 2023, the coup drew immediate condemnation from France, the United States, and the economic community of West African states. Paris was particularly vocal. France had long positioned itself as the security guarantor of the Sahel, maintaining troops across the region under various counter-terrorism frameworks. The French government warned of consequences. ECOWAS threatened military intervention. The African Union suspended Niger's membership. The junta looked at all of this, held its ground, and began systematically dismantling the infrastructure of French influence, one agreement at a time. The expulsion of French forces was the symbolic blow, but the Uranium decision was the economic declaration of independence. By announcing the redirection of Urano's contracted ore to North Korea, the Kiani government was doing several things simultaneously. It was asserting that Niger, not France, not Urano, not any bilateral mining agreement signed under previous administrations, had ultimate sovereign authority over its own mineral resources. It was signaling that it was prepared to absorb the economic and diplomatic costs of that assertion. And it was choosing a partner, North Korea, whose selection was itself a political statement of extraordinary clarity. The choice of Pyongyang as a recipient deserves careful analysis, because it is not simply an economic transaction. North Korea is under sweeping international sanctions precisely because of its nuclear weapons program. The transfer of uranium to North Korea, depending on its ultimate use, could represent a significant proliferation concern. Even if the ore is intended for energy rather than weapons purposes, and Pyongyang's track record on that distinction is not reassuring to the international community. The deal places Niger in direct confrontation not just with France, but with the entire architecture of international nuclear non-proliferation that the United States and its allies have spent decades constructing. This is where the stakes become clear. Niger is not simply renegotiating a mining contract. It is inserting itself into one of the most sensitive intersections of energy security and weapons proliferation on the global stage. France's response has been sharp. Paris has argued that the uranium under dispute legally belongs to Urano under the terms of its existing mining agreements, agreements that, in France's view, the coup government has no authority to unilaterally void. French officials have warned of serious consequences, though exactly what those consequences might look like remains deliberately vague. Urano has its own contractual claims, and the company has been pushing for arbitration through international mechanisms. Niger has simply rejected that framing. The junta's position is that sovereignty over natural resources is non-negotiable, that agreements signed by previous administrations do not bind the current government, and that any attempt by France or international bodies to force compliance will be resisted. To enforce that resistance, the Kiani government has done something that speaks to how seriously it takes this confrontation. It has deployed troops to physically secure the uranium mines. This is not a bureaucratic dispute playing out in courtrooms. Armed soldiers now stand between Urano's operational interests and its contracted ore. The message is unmistakable. What happens next could redefine the region. Because Niger is not alone. The uranium crisis is unfolding within a broader regional context that France and its Western partners have been slow to fully absorb. The military governments of Mali and Burkina Faso, both of which experienced their own coups in recent years, both of which expelled French forces, both of which have pivoted toward Russia and other non-Western partners, have explicitly backed Niger in this confrontation. The three countries have moved to formalize their alignment through the Alliance of Sahel States, a new regional grouping that positions itself as an alternative to ECOWAS and as a direct challenge to the existing architecture of Western influence in West Africa. This is no longer three isolated coups. This is a coordinated strategic realignment of a significant swath of West Africa, and Niger's uranium move is its most consequential single act. The involvement of North Korea adds another layer. Pyongyang has reportedly been offering Niger not just a commercial relationship, but political support, backing in international forums, potential technical assistance, and the kind of diplomatic solidarity that comes with no conditions about democratic governance or human rights. For a military junta facing Western pressure, that is a valuable commodity. The relationship between the Kiani government and Pyongyang is still developing, and the full parameters of their arrangement are not publicly known, but the strategic logic on both sides is legible. North Korea wants uranium. Niger wants partners who will not demand it hold elections. Each has something the other needs. Russia, meanwhile, hovers in the background. Moscow has been the dominant alternative security partner for the new generation of Sahelian military governments, deploying Wagner Group, now operating under the Africa Corps branding after Yevgeny Prigozhin's death, across Mali and Burkina Faso. While Russia has not been publicly named as a direct party in the Niger uranium dispute, the broader pattern of Russian engagement in the region creates a context in which Western leverage over these governments is systematically eroding. France is finding that its once formidable network of military basing, bilateral agreements, and political relationships in the Sahel has been hollowed out faster than almost anyone predicted. Consider what France now faces. Within the space of roughly 2 years, it has been expelled from Mali, from Burkina Faso, and from Niger. Its counterterrorism operation in the Sahel, Operation Barkhane, one of the largest French military deployments since the Cold War, has effectively collapsed. Its nuclear energy supply chain has been disrupted, and the government responsible for that disruption is now working with North Korea and receiving diplomatic backing from 2 neighboring military juntas. The cumulative weight of these developments represents a strategic retreat of historic proportions for French influence in West Africa. Paris is in a difficult position. Military intervention to reclaim the uranium mines is not a realistic option. The political and military costs would be enormous, the international optics would be devastating, and there is no appetite in France for a neo-colonial armed incursion into a landlocked Sahelian state. Economic pressure is limited by the fact that Niger, like Mali and Burkina Faso before it, has demonstrated a willingness to absorb significant economic pain rather than capitulate to French demands. International arbitration requires the cooperation of a government that has explicitly rejected that framework. And diplomatic isolation is complicated by the fact that Russia, North Korea, and potentially others are prepared to provide the alternative relationships that make isolation less painful. France is left with warning of serious consequences, while watching those consequences become harder to credibly deliver. The broader implications for European energy security deserve attention. France's nuclear program, for all its strategic advantages, has always carried an embedded vulnerability. The fuel it depends on comes from places over which Paris has limited control. Niger was supposed to be one of the more secure nodes in that supply chain, a former colony, a nation with deep institutional ties to France, a country where French military presence provided both security and political influence. The dissolution of that relationship is a warning signal for European energy planners. Nuclear power may be domestically generated, but nuclear fuel is not. The politics of uranium supply are now unmistakably geopolitics. There is also a significant question about the precedent this dispute sets for the rest of Africa. Niger is not the only African country sitting on mineral resources extracted under long-standing arrangements with Western companies that were negotiated under conditions of acute power asymmetry. Democratic Republic of Congo and its cobalt, Zambia and its copper, Guinea and its bauxite. The list is long, and the political pressures in many of these countries are not entirely dissimilar to those that have driven the Sahelian realignment. Leaders across the continent are watching to see whether Niger pays a sustainable price for what it has done, or whether it establishes a workable model for asserting resource sovereignty without catastrophic consequences. That calculation will shape resource politics across Africa for years. At the same time, the path Niger has chosen is not without serious dangers. Aligning with North Korea introduces risks that go well beyond the immediate uranium transaction. If the ore is diverted toward weapons purposes, Niger becomes implicated in nuclear proliferation, a designation that carries consequences far more severe than anything France alone can impose. International sanctions, potential designations under U.S. law, exclusion from global financial systems. These are not abstract threats. The Kiani government appears to be calculating that its own strategic importance to multiple competing powers provides some insulation from the most extreme consequences. But that calculation could prove optimistic. There is also the question of domestic stability. Niger's economy is fragile. Its population is young and under enormous pressure from insecurity, food shortages, and climate shocks. The junta's legitimacy rests heavily on its nationalist posture. The expulsion of French forces and the assertion of resource sovereignty have genuine popular support, particularly among younger Nigerians who had grown up watching their country's mineral wealth depart, while poverty statistics remained grim. But nationalist sentiment is not a substitute for economic development, and if the uranium dispute and the realignment away from Western partners results in sustained economic deterioration, that popular support could erode. The question of how this ends has no clean answer. A negotiated settlement between Niger and Urano is theoretically possible, but it would require the junta to accept terms it has so far rejected and to effectively walk back its most symbolically charged move. A complete severance of the uranium relationship with France, combined with the North Korea deal proceeding, would represent a permanent restructuring of the regional order, with consequences for non-proliferation that could draw in actors far beyond Paris. A military confrontation remains extremely unlikely, but cannot be entirely removed from the table if the situation escalates in ways that directly threaten Western security interests. And a slow degradation. The dispute continuing without resolution, the mines under military control, Urano's operations suspended, France's influence further diminished, is perhaps the most probable near-term scenario. What is already certain is that the architecture of French influence in the Sahel, the network of military agreements, resource contracts, political relationships, and institutional ties that constituted what critics called Francafrique, has taken blows from which it will not recover in anything like its current form. That architecture was already under stress before the coups. The coups have accelerated a structural collapse that had been building for years. For France, this is a moment of painful strategic reckoning. For Niger and its allies in the alliance of Sahel states, it is a declaration that the post-colonial settlement is over and a new one must be negotiated, on different terms, with different partners, and on a timeline they intend to control. For the international community, it is a test of whether the non-proliferation framework can hold when a uranium-rich state decides that its strategic interests align with Pyongyang rather than Paris. And for the region, for the millions of people living under military governments across Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, governments that have traded French military protection for Russian mercenaries, and now potentially North Korean commercial ties, governments that have asserted sovereignty while showing no urgency toward democracy. The deeper question remains unresolved. Resource sovereignty is a legitimate aspiration. The question that history will judge is whether the path chosen to pursue it leads toward genuine development and self-determination, or merely replaces one set of external dependencies with another, newer, and perhaps more dangerous one. 1,000 tons of uranium. In a landlocked desert country that most of the world cannot locate on a map, a military government has made a decision that reverberates through European nuclear strategy, global non-proliferation frameworks, and the long, unfinished reckoning between Africa and the powers that once colonized it. The mines are secured. The troops are in position. The French warnings are on record. And the uranium, reportedly, is moving east. Where this leads, whether toward a new model of African resource sovereignty, toward a proliferation crisis, toward a broader regional conflict, or toward some negotiated accommodation that none of the current players can yet see, is the central geopolitical question of the Sahel for the years ahead. What is not in question is that something fundamental has changed. The old arrangement is over. What replaces it is still being decided, and the decisions being made right now in Niamey and Paris and Pyongyang will echo far longer than any single mining contract. Here is your 500-word cinematic ending for the script. And so here we are. France came to Niger with contracts, with mining rights, with the quiet confidence of a power that had never truly accepted that the colonial era was over, only that it had changed its name. Niger answered with soldiers at the mine gates. And North Korea answered with something far more dangerous than words. This is the moment that historians will look back on and identify as the fracture point. Not the coup, not the expulsion of French forces, not even the uranium announcement. This moment, when a nuclear-armed state inserted itself directly into a resource war on African soil, is where the old order stopped pretending it could hold. Because what North Korea's response signals is not simply military solidarity. It is a message delivered to every Western capital simultaneously. It says, the rules you wrote, the institutions you built, the frameworks you designed to keep the developing world economically dependent and strategically manageable, they are no longer universally respected. There are now players at the table who did not sign your agreements, do not fear your sanctions, and have every incentive to help others walk away from your system entirely. France is staring at the ruins of Francafrique and struggling to accept what it is seeing. The Sahel, a region Paris once treated as its strategic backyard, its uranium reserve, its proof of continued global relevance, has become the stage for a confrontation it never prepared for and cannot easily win. Mali is gone. Burkina Faso is gone. Niger is gone. And the alliance of Sahel states is not asking for permission to exist. But here is what no one is saying loudly enough. This is not a victory lap. Not for Niger. Not for the junta in Niamey. Not for the millions of ordinary people who will live with the consequences of decisions being made by generals and dictators who have replaced one master with several others. Resource sovereignty without democratic accountability is not liberation. It is a different kind of captivity. The uranium may stop flowing to France. But who does it flow to now? A regime in Pyongyang that feeds its own people into labor camps while racing to expand its nuclear arsenal. The optics of African sovereignty built on a partnership with North Korea should trouble everyone who believes this realignment is purely about justice. History is rarely clean. The grievances are real. The exploitation was real. The inequality written into those mining contracts was real. But the path forward matters as much as the destination. What Niger and its allies have proven is that the old order is breakable. What they have not yet proven is that what replaces it will serve their people better. That is the question that will define the next decade in the Sahel. Not who controls the mines, but who the mines ultimately serve. The world is watching, and for once, it cannot look away.